Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramana Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about the second verse of Aruṇācala Padigam, but there's a continuity between one verse and the other, so I'll just quickly refer to the previous verse, in which Bhagavan, the principal prayer in the previous verse was prayer for seeing Aruṇācala. Here, seeing doesn't mean just seeing his physical form. What is implied is seeing his real nature, his swarupa, having swarupa darshanam. That is the implication of the previous verse. So he says, if you who by your grace took charge of me are not gracious, giving me sight of you, and that is enabling me to see you, what will be my state if I leave this body, having pined and suffered intensely in this dark and miserable world? Without seeing the sun, will a lotus blossom? Being forever as the sun to the sun, O love called the great Aruṇa hill, from which grace surges as a spring, gushing forth abundantly. The implication of that last sentence is, being the sun, forever as the sun to the sun, will my heart lotus blossom without seeing you. That is the implication. So in this second verse, that is why we are not seeing Aruṇācala as he really is, as he actually is because of our lack of love to do so. That is, in order to see him as seeing him as he actually is seeing ourselves as we actually are, because he is what we actually are. So long as we are interested in seeing or experiencing anything other than ourselves, we are thereby nourishing and sustaining ego, the false awareness, I am this body. So long as we experience ourselves as I am this body, we don't experience ourselves as we actually are. So we don't experience Aruṇācala as he actually is. So in order to see him as he actually is, we need to have all-consuming love to see him as he actually is, and be willing to sacrifice ourselves entirely for that love, to give ourselves wholly to him, to lose ourselves in him. So this second verse is a prayer for Bhagavan is praying for that love. So the previous verse ended with the word anbe, that is, he ended by saying, Arunama male enumambe. That means, O love called the great Aruṇa hill. So he's addressing Aruṇācala as love itself. Here in this verse, he begins by saying, Amburu Varuṇācala, Aruṇācala, the form of love. The form of love implies one whose very form or very nature, whose essence is love, who is love itself. So Aruṇācala is love itself, so he alone can give us the love that we require. That's the implication. So what he sings in this verse is, Amburu Varuṇācala Varam Meruhai Ahattunain Nanain Dunain Duruhum Ambili Enukun Ambile Ambine Aruladu Andane Aritidal Laraho Ambinil Vileum Imbame Yamba Ahattinil Uruma Amudei Empuhalidum Ninishtum Enishtum Imbadaku Enu Iree. That is the verse. The first sentence of the verse begins, as I say, Amburu Varuṇācala, Aruṇācala, the form of love. He's addressing Aruṇācala, the form of love. Then the meaning of the whole of the first sentence is, Aruṇācala, the form of love, having taken charge, implying having taken charge of me, is it befitting for you to ruin me by not granting me love for you, who is one without love, in which one melts, softening like wax in fire, thinking of you in the heart. So after addressing Aruṇācala as Amburu Varanachala, Aruṇācala, the very form of love, he then describes himself as Aram Meruhai Hatune Ninendu Nendu Uruhum Ambili. Ambili means one who is devoid of love. What love? Such love that will without that is such love in which one melts, softening like wax in fire, thinking of you in the heart. That is, if we really have the love that we require for Aruṇācala, the mere thought of Aruṇācala would make us melt like wax in fire, thinking of him in the heart. But Bhagavan is saying he lacks such love. So to me, Enaku means to me and one who lacks such love, un ambene aruladu, not giving unambene, that means love for you, not giving me love for you, after andu anye means after having taken charge of me. Is it Aritidil means ruining. Araho means beauty. Araho is an interrogative form. So is it beauty? In other words, what he implies is it befitting you? Is it beauty for you? Is it appropriate for you to ruin me by not granting me love for you, not granting love for you to me, who am one who is without such love in which one melts, softening like wax in fire, thinking of you in the heart. So this is a question, but it's obviously a rhetorical question. The implication is it's not befitting to, having taken charge of me, having brought me to your feet, having kept me here, if you don't give me the all-consuming love, the wholehearted love, in which I'm ready to give myself to you, in which I'm ready to melt like wax in fire, thinking of you, if you don't give me such love, it's not becoming you, it's not befitting you. So it's not beauty for you. Yeah, that's why you use the word beauty there. Then the next sentence is Ambinil Vilayum Imbame, that's addressing Aruṇācala as O bliss, bliss produced in love. Ambinil Vilayum, Ambu means love, Ambinil is in love, Vilayum, which is produced or which grows or ripens or it takes birth, and it implies in this context, takes birth in happiness that takes birth in love. That is, this is a very significant description of Aruṇācala. That is, he says Aruṇācala is the happiness or the bliss that is produced in love. In the first sentence of Nana, he says, Priyataku Sukhame Karanamadalalom, since happiness alone is the cause of love. That is, we love whatever makes us happy. Here he's saying the other side of the same thing, that happiness is born out of love. So love is the cause of happiness, and happiness is the cause of love. We love both. We love what makes us happy, and what we love makes us happy. So the ultimate happiness is the infinite happiness that is our own real nature. That happiness, Aruṇācala, is that happiness that is produced in love, but just like rice is produced in a paddy field, it's the fruit of that love is the happiness, and that Aruṇācala is happiness itself, and he's also Aruṇācala is love itself, and he's also the happiness that is produced by that love. So that's a beautiful description of Aruṇācala. Oh, happiness born in love, produced in love, or born in love. Amba ahattinil urum aramudei. Oh, Amude means amrita, ambrosia. He's this Amude implies the satiating ambrosia. Amba hatinil urum, welling up in the heart of devotees. So Aruṇācala is the happiness born in, produced in love. He's the satiating ambrosia that wells up in the heart of devotees. Empuhalita, what to say? So what can I say to you? You are the very form of love. You're the happiness that is produced in love. You're the satiating ambrosia welling up in the heart of your true devotees. So if you do not give me love, though I'm devoid of that love, if you do not give me that love, is it appropriate? You've already brought me, you've already taken charge of me. Now it is your duty to finish the task you've commenced by giving me that love for you, because only when I have that love for you will I be able to see you as you actually are. That's the implication. And then the next sentence is ninittam enittam. Ittam is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word ishtam. Ishta means wish or will, or liking or desire. So ninishtam enishtam means your will is my will, your wish is my wish. In other words, I don't want anything other than what you want. I don't want any will of my own. I only want what you want, because whatever you want is what is best. So your ninishtam enishtam, your ishtam is my ishtam. Your wish, liking, desire, or will, that alone is what I wish for, like, or desire, or want. So ninishtam enishtam, imbu adaku. Imbu adu eku. Imbu means happiness. Adu means that. Eku means to me. That is happiness to me or for me. So that is happiness for me. That is your wish is my wish. That is happiness for me. So whatever you wish, I'm happy with that. I don't want anything other than what you wish for me. So if you wish to put me in hell, fine. I'm happy with that, because that is your wish. So that is my wish. This is complete surrender. When we give our will, when we surrender our will completely to him, when we don't want anything of our own, anything other than what he wills. But of course, we cannot surrender our will completely without surrendering ourselves, for one who has a will. So long as we rise as ego, we inevitably have some likes and dislikes of our own. It's inevitable. We can't rise as ego without having likes and dislikes. So the complete surrender of our will is possible only when we surrender ourselves, when we give up this ego. So when Bhagavan says, your wish is my wish, that is happiness for me, that is describing the state of complete surrender, in which we've ceased to rise as a separate individual with a will of its own. So it's a very, very beautiful, description of that state of complete surrender. Your will is my will. That is happiness for me. Enui ireye. Enui means my we can mean either life or soul. Ire means, O Lord. So Lord of my life, or Lord of my soul. He addresses Aruṇācala. So the meaning of the whole verse is, the bare meaning without any explanation is, Aruṇācala, the form of love, having taken charge, is ruining me befitting, not granting love for you to me, one without love in which one melts, softening like wax in fire, thinking of you in the heart. O happiness produced in love, O satiating ambrosia welling up in the heart of devotees, what to say? Your wish is my wish, that is happiness for me, Lord of my soul. So if we slightly expand it to bring out all the implications, Aruṇācala, the form of love, the one whose very form or nature or essence is love, having taken charge of me, is it befitting you to ruin me by not granting love for you to me, who am one without such love, in which one melts, softening like wax in fire, thinking of you in the heart? The heart means in the very center of oneself. Oh, happiness produced or born or grown or ripened in love. Oh, satiating, pervading, enduring ambrosia welling up in the heart of devotees. What to say? Your ishtam is my ishtam. That is, your wish, liking, will, desire is my wish, liking, will, or desire. That is happiness for me, Lord of my life, Lord of my soul, or Lord of my life. So that's, again, a very, very beautiful prayer. But the love that Bhagavan is praying for here is the love for the love in which we melt with love for him, and thereby are willing to give ourselves wholly to him, because only when we give ourselves wholly to him, that is, the complete surrender is annihilation of ego. So long as we retain any trace of ego, we still are remaining separate from him. But when we surrender ourselves completely to him, ego is dissolved in him, and he alone remains. And in that state, there's no separate individual to have a separate ego, to have a will of its own. So his will alone is our will. That is happiness. So it's a beautiful prayer. Does anyone have any questions about this verse?
Yeah. There's a question now about the text from Tony. Would you like to speak up?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
A very simplistic observation from my point of view, and in as much as for me, it's like a catch-22. I want to give love to Ishvara, to Bhagavan, to Aruṇācala, and I want him or them to give me the love so that I can give the love.
Yes.
So I'm kind of stuck.
Well, yeah, we're all stuck. That is, it's why Bhagavan prays to Aruṇācala for love, because the very nature of ego is, as he explains, for example, in verse 25 of Ulladu Napadu, ego comes into existence grasping form. It stands grasping form. That means it endures grasping form. Grasping on feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So that means the very nature of ego is to grasp form. Form means anything other than itself, because ego has no form of its own. That's why it has no separate existence, except when it rises grasping form. So its grasping form is what gives it a seeming separate existence. So the nature of ego is to have desire and attachment for things other than itself. So from where can that love to surrender ourselves completely come? It cannot come from ego. It can only come from our real nature, because love is our real nature. And it's our real nature in the form of Aruṇācala that Bhagavan is addressing here. That is, Aruṇācala is nothing other than our own Swarupa, what we actually are, that is Aruṇācala. So it's only from Aruṇācala, from our real nature, that we can get that love, the love that is required for us to surrender ourselves completely. So, so long as we continue to rise as ego, we are actually rejecting his love. He's ever ready to give us that love, but instead of yielding ourselves to that love, to that grace, grace is nothing but the infinite love that he has for us. But we are not yielding ourselves to that grace by turning within and allowing it to draw us back into the heart. We keep on rising by grasping form and going outwards. So this is the working of grace. It's to slowly wean us off our desire and attachment for other things, and to kindle in our heart that love to surrender ourselves. That is why the whole of this Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam, these 5 hymns to Aruṇācala, why these are so significant. Bhagavan often used to say, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means that love to surrender ourselves completely. If we don't have that love, we cannot surrender ourselves. Why when we know Bhagavan has asked us to investigate and know what we actually are. But when we try to attend to ourselves, when we try to hold on to that self-attentiveness, why does our attention keep on coming outwards? It's because under the sway of our Vishaya Vasanas are the seeds of desire and attachment for things other than ourselves. So we cannot succeed in this path of self-investigation without all-consuming love. And that love, as I say, it cannot come from ego, because that love is contrary to the very nature of ego. The very nature of ego is to have desire and attachment. Whereas the true love is the love to let go of everything and subside back in the heart and to be as we actually are. So it's all about love. This path of there's many people who lack a deep and subtle understanding. They think the path of bhakti is one path and the path of jnana is another path. That is a very serious misconception. The path of jnana, which is the path of Atma-vichara, is the pinnacle of the path of love. It's the final stages of the path of love, when we are seeking to give ourselves entirely, to merge back into the heart and to be as we actually are, which is God or Guru or Aruṇācala or Bhagavan or whatever we call it. That is, so this Bhagavan's path is the path of bhakti. But the ultimate path of bhakti. We cannot give ourselves wholly to God without knowing what we actually are. Because so long as we rise as ego, we know ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So we can destroy this ego only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. That's why in the 13th paragraph of Nana, he begins by defining what is surrender. He doesn't use the word surrender. He says giving oneself to God. He says being Atmanishtaparan. Atmanishtaparan means one who is firmly fixed as oneself. In other words, being as we actually are alone is giving oneself to God. So how to be as we actually are? He says in the first clause of that sentence, giving no room to the rising of any thought other than Atmachintana. Atmachintana literally means thought of oneself, but it of course implies self-attentiveness. So not giving room to the rising of any thought other than self-attentiveness. That is, we need to fix our attention on ourselves so keenly that there's no room for any other thought to arise. Then only we will subside back into our natural state of being, which is what he describes as Atmanishtaparanayirapate, being and that alone is giving ourselves to God. So aim of the path of bhakti is the ultimate achievement in the path of bhakti is to surrender oneself completely, to give oneself entirely to God. This can be effectuated only by self-investigation. But we cannot investigate ourselves without all-consuming love to surrender ourselves. Because so long as we're not willing to surrender ourselves, we won't be willing to hold on to self-attentiveness. We'll find every excuse possible to attend to other things.
Yeah, it's such a lovely expression to have love for what we actually are, and of course what we really are, and turn within.
Yeah.
Almost like a magnetic grace coming towards us, and the further we turn, the more we're captured by it.
Exactly. That's why he describes Aruṇācala as a magnetic hill. It had that power of attracting us.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Well, all thanks to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan,
Of course.
I mean, many great Advaitins in the past have been great bhaktas. It's a very serious misconception that Advaita is somehow devoid of bhakti. Advaita without bhakti is not Advaita at all, because Advaita means one only without a second. So long as we rise as ego, we're in a state of seeming duality. So if we are to experience that state of one only without a second, we need to give ourselves entirely to God, to the one. We have to lose ourselves in the one. And so long as we rise as ego, that one seems to be something other than ourselves. So we worship it as God or as Guru or whatever. But God comes in the form of Guru, as Bhagavan, to tell us that God is not something other than ourselves. He's our own being. So we can surrender ourselves to him only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. So Bhagavan has so beautifully tied together bhakti and jnana, because they're inseparable. If we understand it correctly, if we think that bhakti and jnana are two different things, we haven't understood either bhakti or jnana. Bhagavan has made clear the oneness of bhakti and jnana. So in works like Nana, Uludunapadu, Upadesha Undya, Anma-Vide, and so on, he's giving us Upadesha. He's telling us what we need to do. We need to investigate ourselves. But when we actually try to apply that in practice, we come across the big obstacle. We really don't want to do this. Then we understand the importance of Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. The Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam is a practical application of all that Bhagavan teaches us in Uludunapadu, Upadesha, Nana, and so on.
I mean, we know what love is. We know what great love is. It just, unfortunately, we express it to our ego self.
Exactly. Bhagavan says in that first sentence of Nana, for everyone, the greatest love is for oneself. But there's no wrong in loving ourselves. The wrong is that we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. Because we mistake ourselves to be this person. We have so much love for this person. But this person is not what we actually are. And the more love we have for this person, the more selfish and mean and unkind we are to others. But when we realize that what we actually are is not this little person, but is the being of everyone, then all the selfishness and everything goes. And then there's the infinite love that is Bhagavan alone remains.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for channeling Bhagavan.
Well, why Bhagavan had so much love for everyone? He wasn't partial for good people and unkind to. His love was equal for good people and bad people, for rich and poor, for high caste, low caste, India, foreigner. For Bhagavan, there are no such differences because he doesn't see us as other than himself. In his view, there is only one. So he sees us as himself. So he loves us as himself. That is why his love is infinite. There's no limit on his love. So long as we limit ourselves as ego, our love is very, very limited. We love
And
our family. We love it's all tied up with this identification. This is my family, my husband, my wife, my parents, my children, my country, my religion, my political party, my this, my that. All this is, it's all bound up with ego, because the basic identification, why is it my husband or my wife, my parents, my children? Because I take myself to be this body. Why is this my country? And those are other countries. Why is this my religion? Those are other religions. Why is this my political view? Those are, it's all bound with the basic basic identification. I am this body.
I
So
think
our love is inevitably limited so long as we rise as ego.
Bhagavan demonstrated that, didn't he, Michael, in person, in his life, his impartial
Absolutely.
love.
And it wasn't just for human beings, for all species.
Yeah.
When the snake came and crawled over him, he just kept quiet. When scorpions climbed up his back and climbed down in front, he kept quiet. They didn't disturb him. He said, well, does a scorpion, when it climbs a wall, does it go stinging the wall on the way? If you just remain quiet, it won't do anything to you. So
I'm not sure.
He had love for all. He allowed the hornets to sting his thigh.
Yes. And I don't think the scorpion test, I'm not ready for that yet, but thank you so much.
Yeah, we're none of us ready for that yet, but that is that outward expressions of love is not necessary. What is necessary? That we have that love to melt back into the heart. If we have that love, then it will manifest as it manifested in the outward form of Bhagavan.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, there's a question about Giri Pradakshina, which could be
Okay, sure.
kind of related to
Yes.
this, I think. So the question is, could you explain why Bhagavan recommended doing Could you explain why Bhagavan recommended doing Giri Pradakshina? For me, the more I do it, the more I want to do it. On a superficial level, I believe Pradakshina helps me become more detached from the world. But on a deeper level, I believe it is helping me subside. Should I be doing it daily if I am able to?
Certainly.
Nowadays, during the Pradakshina, the hill is barely visible, and also many small temples have been built along the route. Should we visit all of them? I remember seeing an old YouTube video where you, along with Sri Sadhu Om and a few others, did Pradakshina in the 1980s, stopping at the Ashtlingams and several old shrines. It would be great if you could share some references from Sri Sadhu Om or Sri Muruganar about Giri Pradakshina directly from Bhagwan.
Okay, well, firstly, in those days, yes, there were very, now so many shrines and have appeared on the route. But in those days, there were the shrines around the Pradakshina Road were very much fewer. It's an old custom, that is the Ashtalingas. They are each of the according to the Puranas, there are 8 directions, and for each direction there is a deity who is the presiding deity of that direction. So for each of those, they're called the Ashtadikpalakas, the protectors of the 8 directions. So each of those Ashtadikpalakas worships Aruṇācala. So for example, the Dikpalaka for the south is Yama. So there's Yamalingam is to the south. Then south west is Niriti. So there's the Niriti Linga, and to the west is Varuna, then Vayu, then Kubera, then Isanya, Indra, and Agni. So these are the Ashadic Palicans. They're worshipping Aruṇācala. So where they worship Aruṇācala, it is customary to do namaskaram there. A little bit more difficult nowadays because it's what used to be a nice, quiet country road with the occasional bullock cart and a very occasional lorry passing along. Now it's very, very busy with so much traffic and everything. It's not so easy nowadays to prostrate in all the places we used to prostrate. But these points are just points to remind us. So, I mean, we can prostrate to Aruṇācala anywhere because it doesn't matter, but these points are just points to remind us. So we do prostrations there. Talking about the shrines, once when Bhagavan was going around the hill with a group of devotees, some of the devotees were doing namaskaram at the Ashta Lingas and other important places. But some of them were just going on chit-chatting or doing whatever they were doing. So when they came to Durvasa ashram, that's a small shrine there, Bhagavan himself stepped off the road and went around Durvasa, and he remarked, we can afford to ignore all the other shrines, but we shouldn't ignore Durvasa. That is an indirect way of telling them that we're not going around the hill just for a nice walk in the countryside and to chit-chat our usual, whatever our worldly preoccupations are. This is an act of worship. So why Bhagavan chose to go round Durvasa? Durvasa is a rishi who is very renowned for his anger. That's why Bhagavan jokingly said we can afford to ignore all the other shrines, but we shouldn't ignore Durvasa. That's just that it was an indirect, it was meant a little bit humorously, but it was also meant as an instruction. We going around Aruṇācala, it's an act of worship. Why we go around Aruṇācala? Aruṇācala is our own self appearing outwardly in the form of a hill. So this is it is an act of worship. Aruṇācala is Shiva himself, as Bhagavan often said. It is the Adi Linga Sarupa. It's the form of it is the original Linga. So it's the form of the original Linga. So we go around Aruṇācala as an act of worship. About the significance of going round, well, you yourself, the one who has asked this question, have themselves experienced that the more we go round, the more we are drawn to go round. There's some attraction to going around Aruṇācala. It's something that it can't be explained, but we can experience it. If we go round, we're drawn to go round more and more and more. So if you're living in Tiruvannamalai and able to, going around every day is very good. It has the effect it has on the mind is something very, very subtle. But I often feel that I have the good fortune to live nearly 20 years in Tiruvannamalai. And during most of that time, I was going around the hill daily. For many years, without a break, I was going daily around the hill. I can't prove this in any way, but it seems to me that whatever clarity of understanding I have about Bhagavan's teachings, whatever love I have for Bhagavan, it's all intimately bound up with the fact that he gave me that opportunity and gave me the love to go round the hill every day. So it is, well, in my experience, it is definitely a very, very great, but there's a very great spiritual benefit. And Bhagavan himself made it very, very clear. Devaraja Mudli has recorded, but once, either Devaraja Mudli or someone was asking Bhagavan about the efficacy, and it said, is it all just a matter of faith? And Bhagavan said, if you touch fire, it will burn you whether you believe in it or not. Likewise, if you go round Aruṇācala, It will do good for you, whether you believe it or not. So it's not just dependent on our belief. There is a power there. And that power works in a very, very subtle way.
When you say do good for you, what was the nature of this goodness which it would do for you?
Bhagavan has defined what is goodness in the last paragraph of Nana. He says, Evlo kevlo tandu nadikaromo, avlo kavlo nanmayundu. That means how, to the extent to which we, it's very difficult to adequately translate it into English. Tandu means subsiding. Nadikarom means literally it means we walk, but it doesn't mean just the physical action of walking. It implies conduct ourselves. So to the extent to which we conduct ourselves in a subsiding manner, in other words, to the extent to which we are humble, truly humble, not just an outward show of humility, but inwardly subsiding, to that extent there is goodness. So for Bhagavan, evil is the rising of ego. That's why he describes ego as Uruvatra Paya Hande. Pay means a demon. So our very rising as ego is demonic. So goodness is nothing but subsidence of ego. To the extent to which ego subsides, to that extent there is goodness. So when Bhagavan said it will do good to you, the implication is it will bring about the subsidence of ego.
Thank you.
Because ultimately that is the only good. So long as we rise as ego, we have to face this world. We all know what the world is like. That is Bhagavan in verse 24 of Uludunapadu. Bhagavan, when he's describing what is ego, he describes it as ichamsaram, this samsara. So according to Bhagavan, samsara is nothing but ego itself. Samsara means embodied existence and all the troubles that come with embodied existence and the repeated cycle of birth and death that is inevitable so long as we rise as ego. So all the troubles of the world are caused by our rising as ego. So ego is the source and embodiment of all evil. The subsidence of ego is all goodness. And what is and this is the speciality of Aruṇācala. As Bhagavan says in the first verse of Aksharamlai, Aruṇācala mena ahamenine parve ahate verarupai Aruṇācala. You eradicate the ego of those who think of you in the heart. So that is, Aruṇācala is all about subsidence of ego. And it's Aruṇācala who appeared in the form of Bhagavan. So Bhagavan is also all about the subsidence of ego. I often say, Bhagavan ends Uludunapadu. In the final verse of Uludunapadu, he defines what is liberation. If it is said that the liberation one may attain is of three kinds, with form, without form, or without form, then I will say the destruction of the ego form that distinguishes liberation with form, without form, or without form, that alone is liberation. So he ends Uludunapadu talking about the annihilation of ego. He begins Aruṇācala Aksharamlai from the point at which he ended Uludunapadu. By beginning, you eradicate the ego of those who think of you in the heart. So Bhagavan's teachings are all about eradication of ego. So to the extent to which we subside, to that extent there is goodness, as he says in the final paragraph of Nana.
Sort of the other questions are more general, and
Yes.
the next one is from one of your videos. And he said, the first question, and this has a follow-up, is in the latest video published on the Sri Ramana Teachings Q&A channel, you address some of the biggest misconceptions and false claims about self-realization. In that clip, you said that self-realization is the death of the experiencer. In other words, there is no experience anymore. This seems to challenge a widely held idea that self-realization is some kind of extraordinary or profound spiritual experience. Could you kindly explain what this really means?
Okay.
And then there's a follow-up which we can.
Okay, I'll answer this one first. Ego is the experiencer that it's the experiencer in the sense that it is that which experiences everything other than itself. So in any experience, there's what in Sanskrit is called the triputi, and Bhagavan in Tamil called the muputi, the three factors of objective knowledge. That is, there's the knower, the knowing, and the known. Knowing means the means of knowing. So if you see something, you who see it are the knower, the seer. The means by which you know it is seeing. And the object that you know is what you see. So like that, in every experience, there's an experiencer, some means of experiencing, and an experience. So experience in that sense is entirely dependent on ego. But in the absence of ego in sleep, is experience totally absent there? Yes and no. That is, there's no experience of anything other than ourself. But the fundamental experience, the fundamental awareness, I am, is ever shining there. So sometimes the state of self-knowledge is described as Atma-nubhuti or Swarupa-nubhuti, the experience of oneself, or the experience of one's real nature. But it's not an experience in which there's an experience, something experienced and some means of experience. It's a state of complete oneness. So what is experiencing, what is experienced, and the means by which it experiences are all one. They're only ourself. So it is, in a certain sense, an experience, but it's an experience unlike all other experiences. Moreover, it is not a new experience, because what remains after the annihilation of ego is what we always experience, which is this, our fundamental awareness, I am. So, though we can describe it as an experience, but it's an experience in a completely different sense to the sense in which all other experiences are experienced. It's an experience without these three separate factors, the knower, the knowing, and the known. It's the experience in which the experiencer, the means of experiencing, and the experience are all one. But one very important thing that Bhagavan often used to emphasize, it's not a new experience. He often said, if jnana were a new knowledge, something to be attained, whatever is attained will be lost. But this Atma-jnana will not be lost, because it is eternal. Even now, that jnana is shining in us as our own being, as I am. So none of us are devoid of jnana. The problem is, jnana means awareness. On top of that jnana, on top of that awareness, we superimpose this false awareness. That is, I am is our being. But we superimpose on our being a false identification as I am this person, I am this body. So when the false identification is removed, what remains is our being, which is jnana itself. Jnana is our very being. I hope that's an adequately clear answer to that question.
There's a follow-up. So the question is, I've noticed that some people who claim to be self-realized will sometimes assess others, whether they claim it or not, as not being self-realized. But isn't that in itself a major red flag? If
Yes.
someone is truly self-realized, wouldn't they no longer see others as separate individuals, let alone judge whether anyone is realized or not? In other words, wouldn't true self-realization entail seeing only the one self in all, rather than seeing people as self-realized or not?
Absolutely, yes. That is why Bhagavan said the real guru is a guru only in the view of the disciple. The guru will never feel I'm a guru, because in the view of the real guru, firstly, there are no others, and secondly, there's no ajnana, no ignorance. So the jnani cannot see ajnana, just like darkness can never see light. In the view of light, there's no such thing as darkness. In the view of jnana, there's no such thing as ajnana. So that's why it's the Bhagavan never claimed to be guru, and he said guru is necessary, but he didn't say I am the guru, because in his view, he said so long as we take ourselves to be a person, so long as we're aware of ourselves as I am this body, guru is absolutely necessary. But the guru, the real guru, will never feel I am a guru. And another thing, as you say, anyone who talks about others as being realized or unrealized, that is a red flag. Even to say I am self-realized, that itself is a red flag. Bhagavan says in Ulurunapadu, to say I have known myself or I have not known myself are both grounds for ridicule. It's ground to say I have not known myself is a ground for ridicule, because we always know ourselves. The problem is, though we know ourselves wrongly. We know ourselves as something other than what we actually are, because we've superimposed a false identification of ourselves. When that false identification is removed, there's no separate I to say I am self-realized. There's only that is the I that remains after the annihilation of ego is jnana itself, which is eternal, unchanging, self-shining. So it need not say, I am self-realized. In Tamil, there's a saying, Kandava Vindile, Vindava Kandile. That it's a beautiful poetic way of saying it. Those who have seen will not say. Those who say have not seen. That means if we've really experienced ourselves as we actually are, there's no I remaining to say, I have seen. There is only pure being. When we, after I finish talking about Aruṇācala Padigam, I hope to go on to talk about Aruṇācala Ashtakam. There's a verse in Aruṇācala Ashtakam where Bhagavan very beautifully explains this. That is, he uses these words, Kandava and Vindava. Using those words, there's a beautiful verse in which he explains the meaning of this. Those who have seen will not say, those who say have not seen. He doesn't say that explicitly, but it's implied there. Because if we've really seen, we will know that it cannot be said. It's beyond thoughts, it's beyond words.
Just as a sort of a comment on the side, I remember, I think it was decades ago, I'm not sure if I'm correct on this. Um, I believe somebody had asked Bhagwan about either Vivekananda or Yogananda, I'm not sure which one, sort of because they traveled a lot, and it was about one of them, and they traveled a lot, as to whether they were self-realized. I think it was one of them. And Bhagwan said something to the effect, Michael, you will know this better than me, that sort of why do they then sort of travel around so much, move around so much? Am I correct in recalling that?
I've not heard that. I've not heard that.
Yes.
But generally, whenever there was discussion about whether this person or that person is a jnani, Bhagavan he would generally just keep quiet. But if people asked him, is such and such a person a jnani or not a jnani, Bhagavan would say, there's only one jnani. You are that. Know yourself. Because so long as we see others, that's a clear sign of ajnana. When we experience ourselves as we actually are, there'll be no others for us to label as jnanis or ajnanis.
The next question is, God or Bhagwan is apparently allowing for so much in this world that the ego takes to be bad, evil, and to be disliked. For example, the sexual abuse of children, killing of innocents in war, torture, etc. Could a reason for its reluctance to surrender and unite with this God also be fear or even disgust for this God?
Yes, many people say this. Oh, if God is really all loving and all powerful and all knowing, then how all these evils happen in this world? What they fail to understand is this is samsara. The very nature of samsara is suffering. If we take up, samsara means embodied existence. If we take on a body, we are subject to so many limitations. As an embodied being, we are so vulnerable. We're vulnerable to disease, we're vulnerable to accidents, we're vulnerable to natural disasters, we're vulnerable, and sooner or later we're going to die anyway. So this is the nature of samsara. Samsara is not designed to be perfect. Samsara is a creation. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we project a body, and so we experience all these troubles. That's one way of explaining it. Another way of explaining it is whatever is experienced is the fruit of our past karmas. Even in the Bible, it is said, as you sow, so you shall reap. The opposite, the other side of that is, as you reap, so you have sown. So no suffering can befall us that is not the fruit of some action that we've done in the past. However, actions don't give fruit randomly. The fruit of action is given by God. That is, God selects which fruit are most appropriate for us to experience. So whatever we are given to experience in each life of ours is what is most conducive to our spiritual development. If people have a very limited view of God, they'll say, oh, God then must be very cruel and unkind to. God is not punishing us. God allots the fruit of our actions in such a way that will be most beneficial to us. Then people say, how can it be beneficial for a child to be sexually abused or for innocent people to be killed in a war or whatever? We cannot understand these things, but if God is God, he is by definition infinite. So being infinite, he has infinite power, infinite love, and infinite knowledge. So that nothing can happen that is, though in our view, it may seem to be bad. In God's view, whatever happens is what is ultimately best. Another important point to understand is, why do we say some things are good and other things are bad? Wars are bad, peace is good, health is good, disease is bad. We've got so many judgments about what is good or what is bad. But if we think about it a little deeply, what determines what we consider good and what we consider bad is our own likes and dislikes. If we had no likes and dislikes, we would not judge anything either as good or bad. Why we consider war to be bad? Because we don't like it. Why we consider disease to be bad? We don't like it. Why is death bad? We don't like it. Why is peace and health and a long life, why is this good? Because we like it. So it's our own likes and dislikes that determine what is good and what is bad. And when we experience things that we don't like, we suffer. Supposing we had no likes and dislikes, nothing would cause us to suffer. Why we suffer when we're in pain? Because we don't like pain. Why we are happy when we're in good company, enjoying good food, and because we like that. So it's all determined by our own likes and dislikes. And so long as we rise as ego, likes and dislikes are inevitable. And so long as there are likes and dislikes, there are things that will seem to be good and there are things that will seem to be bad. But ultimately, as I explained earlier, from Bhagavan's point of view, if anything is to be called bad, it is our rising as ego. If anything is to be called good, it's the subsidence of ego. Because when we rise as ego, all this samsara comes into being with all its pleasures and pains and good and evil and all these things. And another way of explaining all this is, to whom do all these good and bad things appear? It's only in the view of the dreamer, but everything good and bad in the dream is happening. So this is all just a dream. Because we are dreaming, we see all these things and suffer accordingly. So we should wake up from this dream by knowing ourselves as we actually are. That is the way to put an end to all the evil in the world. Anyone who is troubled by the so-called problem of evil is not a true devotee of God. Because the true devotee of God will surrender themselves to the will of God. Whatever be the will of God, that is good. So if we are sitting in judgment on God, saying God shouldn't allow this, why does God allow this, therefore God is not good, God is bad, God, we are not surrendering ourselves to God. So it's only for very worldly minded, immature minded people who will feel God is not doing his job very well. If I were God, I could do it much better. I wouldn't allow all these bad things to happen, we think. But God in his infinite wisdom knows what is good and what is ultimately good and what is ultimately bad. What is ultimately bad is the rising of ego. So anything that is conducive to the eventual eradication of ego, that is good.
Michael, just a quick comment. It's something I often feel uncomfortable with, and that is the use of the word God. Simply because even though, we went to sort of Christian schools in India and we're very happy going and singing hymns every morning and all that, that's not the issue. But it seems to me that the word God, as an Abrahamic term, is very much to do with an entity or a being who is separate from human beings, from individuals. But there is that distinction which is very, very important in all the Abrahamic traditions. And this is a creator God who creates everything,
Yeah.
as the separate being. Now, sort of since colonization, sort of whether it was in the 14th century or in the 17th, 18th, there has been this effect of, Indian sages, thinkers using the word God as the self. There's a kind of an equation at all levels. And of course, Western scholars and even Indian scholars, there's this creator God is put in, Ishvara as a created God, is a creator God, and then Asati. I mean, there's this creator God thing, which is
Yeah.
put in with a small g everywhere.
Yeah.
And but in Indian traditions, there is not fundamentally this kind of a distinction. At the most, something like Ishvara is a principle which is actually not separate from you. I mean, yes, here and there may be certain kinds of distinctions, but that's really much later on. I think, with Ramanuja and all that. But otherwise, there really isn't a concept of any sort of transcendental God beyond anything. I mean, there are deities, but these are all your own sort of the energies of your own consciousness at a deeper level. I mean, the deities, the
Yeah.
devtas, these are not separate, and hence, you have them among so-called Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, everywhere,
Yeah.
because the energies of one's own self. And the basic concept is of Swayambhu, which is basically that we fabricate ourselves. This is the self-expression of or
Yeah.
whatever, the sort of articulation of the deeper
Yeah.
self. And then when you go back to it, there is only one reality, and
Yeah.
so on. And that's pretty much across all the non-dualist traditions. But even otherwise, even with the Bhagavad Gita and all, I mean, sort of the idea of Krishna, this thing of Purusha and so on, which you have, it really is experiential. It's not like some ontological thing which exists out there and then there is a nature or a prakriti. This is one's own experience. The Purusha is in the end your own consciousness at the deepest level. So what I'm just trying to say is that, I mean, I know it's just a discomfort I'm expressing. I mean, I'm very kind of yeah, because I think it can be a bit confusing, which is not to say that the mystics, whether they're Christian or Islamic or whatever, may not be speaking in very similar ways to a lot of Indian sages, be they Hindu or
Yeah.
Buddhist or whatever. Anyway, this was simply my
Yeah.
comment.
I think one of the problems with the term God is there are so many different conceptions of God. For example, atheists say, I don't believe in God. Which God don't they believe in? Because there's so many different concepts that people have of God. It's what one person means by God is not what another person means by God. As you say, in the Abrahamic religions, God is very much well, he's the creator and he's some sort of overlord, there's some distance. Though there are some hints, I mean, in the Bible, in the Gospels, Jesus is recorded to have said, the kingdom of God is within you. And he doesn't just say the kingdom of God is within you. He say, they will say, look here, look there. But I say, look, see, the kingdom of God is within you. So he's actually asking us to look within. So there is that there is a deeper interpretation of God running underneath all these outward, very outward type of understanding of God. In Indian traditions, many of the Indian traditions are non-theistic, though they all acknowledge many gods, as you say, many powers of nature or whatever. Buddhism is not a theistic religion. Jainism is not a theistic religion. Sankhya is not theistic. Yoga, there's a very slight mention of God in the Yoga Sutra, but it's not central to the Yoga Sutra. It's only in Vedanta that the idea of God is developed. And in Vedanta, it begins with that in the Upanishads, they're not talking about God, they're talking about Brahman. It's really in the Bhagavad Gita that the idea of God as a personal God is developed very much in the Bhagavad Gita, but it's against the background of that personal, that God, that Krishna himself is God, so he's talking as God, but he's also very, very clearly indicating that his real nature, what he actually is Brahman. So God is not something other than Brahman. It's an outward expression of Brahman. So long as we look outwards, we see our own self as a God outside. So it's a very much more sophisticated idea of God than we tend to find in the Abrahamic religions. But there are forms of Vedanta. One of the beauties of Vedanta, it gives room to be interpreted in many different ways. And this is one of the strengths of Vedanta, because if you have one fixed interpretation, that's not going to suit all people. One of the reasons why Buddhism almost completely died out in India and Jainism waned to a great extent was because they were non-theistic. Whereas the strength of Vedanta, it gives room for theistic interpretations. So as Bhagavan said, teaching cannot be given, when it's recorded in talks, when Yogananda came to Bhagavan and he asked what teaching should be given for the uplift of the masses, Bhagavan said, teaching cannot be given en masse. Teaching must be according to the taught, implying that different teachings are suitable for different people at different stages of spiritual development. So one of the strengths of Vedanta, which is why Vedanta is nowadays, when we talk of Hinduism, it's almost synonymous with Vedanta. Though there are other systems, there's Sankhya, you hardly meet anyone who is a Sankhyan nowadays. And there are other systems like the Nyaya and Vaiseshika. There are other systems. And there's also the Purva Mimamsa. But the dominant philosophy of present-day Hinduism is Vedanta. But there are so many different forms of Vedanta, because Vedanta caters for everyone. So that is why there are so many different interpretations. There's Advaita, there's Vishista Dvaita, there's Dvaita, there's Bheda, there's Achintya Bheda, there's Suddha Dvaita, Dvaita. There's so many different interpretations of Vedanta, and new ones are evolving. Like one of the Swami Narayan movement, that is a relatively modern interpretation of Vedanta. It's based mainly on Vishista Dvaita, but it's got its own special interpretation. So though they acknowledge Ramanuja, they're not entirely following Ramanuja. So like this, Vedanta is such a fertile soil for different interpretations, and those different interpretations are appropriate. Some people say, what is the correct interpretation? It's not a matter of the right interpretation or the wrong interpretation. There are deeper interpretations and less deep interpretations. That's all we can say. And the less deep interpretations are what suit most people. The deeper the interpretation, the fewer people it will suit. Even Advaita, there's not a single Advaita. That is, the majority of people who consider themselves to be Advaitins believe in Shrishti Drishti Vada. They believe the world was created by God. Bhagavan taught Drishti Shrishti Vada, but sometimes Bhagavan's answers are given from the perspective of Shrishti Drishti Vada, according to the people he's talking to. For example, if anyone wanted to reform the world, he said, he who has created the world knows how to look after it. Leave it to him, surrender to him. There he's talking from the perspective of Shrishti Drishti, as if God has created the world. because that's the appropriate answer to that person. So the beauty of Vedanta, the strength of Vedanta, the richness of Vedanta, is it can be interpreted in many different ways. And all those different interpretations are valid because each one is suited to people at different stages of spiritual development. And some of the more strongly theistic forms of Vedanta are very similar to, in their theology, they're very similar to the Abrahamic religions. You may say this is a more modern thing, and this is has evolved under the influence of Abrahamic religions, which first came to India really, well, I mean, they were in India even before Islam came to India. There were, it seems, Christians and Jews had settled in India in Kerala about 2,000 years ago. So it's been there, but it didn't have a major impact on India until the Muslim invasions. But I don't think we can attribute all the more theistic interpretations of Vedanta just to the influence of the Abrahamic religions, because there were temples in India before the Muslim invasions. When the Muslims came, they started destroying the temples. So the temple culture is itself based on a theistic form of Vedanta.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a comment, Michael. It's not really particularly important, but I would say that, I mean, as somebody who grew up initially in India for most of my childhood and so on, and I think it's the case for most people. For a lot of people, it's now that at an intellectual level, the notion of Vedanta has been popularized since Vivekananda and everybody else, and it's a notion, but they really sort of in terms of popular culture, the way we all grew up and so on, and even now, if you look at popular culture, that is really bhakti. And
but bhakti is a part of Vedanta.
Yeah, well, the thing, okay, so one other sort of quick note, that bhakti, in a sense, in that sense, goes way back, even to before Vedanta and so on.
Yes.
Really is very old. It even goes back to Buddhism and Jainism, but also others. You know, it's like a popular thing. It's very, very ancient in a way, you know, because even the stupas and these footsteps and blah, 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 you know.
They have
it's very, very
the
old.
Jains and Buddhists have their temples.
Yes, and it's not only them. I mean, it's a popular culture going way back, all the pujas and the prayers and the devotion. But I think what does happen with bhakti, the sort of devotion, is but sort of I think what is kind of common is this idea of a divinity everywhere. You know that, and this is very, very important because that is something you grow up with. And so, for example, you know, when there was, when they had this Babri Masjid thing, when they knocked down the temple, then you had somebody like the Socialist Party of India. I didn't even know they existed, but anyway, there's a party, and they said, "But what are you destroying? If everything is Ram?"
Yes. Good point.
Yes. So this notion that, you know, and this is the reason why we can go, you know, one can go to a church and it's perfectly okay and sit there and just absorb the silence, or go to a mosque or to a Sufi shrine. There's divinities everywhere. So that bhakti element has, I think, been there for a very long time. And you see people like even in the 14th century, anyway, I mean, way much more than that. I think probably 5th, 6th. Anyway, it's just an aside. We'll get back to others' question. I'll see dominate
because
this.
the Bhakti movement, in its modern form, began really in Tamil Nadu with the Nayanmars and Alwas, the Vaishnava and Shaiva saints. And that was about 1,500 years or so ago. And it's that spread, and that is the modern Bhakti movement really began from that time. And Ramanuja built his philosophy on the I mean, partly it was an interpretation of the Vedanta text, but it was very strongly rooted in the Bhakti songs of the Tamil Alwas.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, the next question is, okay, the next question is, how do we distinguish the meaning of the term existence from metaphysical existence?
Metaphysics is the philosophy that deals with existence. So I don't think you can say there's I don't think you can distinguish metaphysical existence. What we can distinguish is we can say existence or we can say being. That is, metaphysics is about being or existence. It's also called ontology. That is ultimately what Vedanta is all about. It's all about being, Satchidananda. And it defines Brahman as, obviously Brahman is called Satchidananda. It's also defined as Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Satyam means Sat, the being, the reality. Jnanam means awareness, and Ananta means infinite. So it's metaphysics deals with existence or being in a more abstract way. And this is what Vedanta is. I mean, Vedanta, in the heart of Vedanta, the philosophical core of Vedanta is metaphysical. But there are other things also seem to exist at other level. We seem to have physical things seem to exist. Mental things seem to exist. Thoughts seem to exist. Feelings seem to exist. But according to Vedanta, there's a very important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 16, in which Krishna says there is no existence of the non-existent, and there's no non-existence of the existence. That is has a very, very deep philosophical implication, because when he says there's no non-existence of what exists, that means what exists must always exist. It's not that it exists for some time and doesn't exist at another time. And what does exist at one time and not at another time, it doesn't really exist at all. Bhagavan expressed it beautifully when he said, that which exists at one time and not at another time doesn't actually exist even when it seems to exist. So what exists must always exist. Anything that comes into existence and ceases to exist, it is not inherently existent. It's gaining existence and losing existence. That means it's not inherently existent. That existence doesn't belong to it. It's borrowing its existence from something else. Just like the usual example that is given is fire. Fire is inherently hot. You can't have a fire without heat. But fire imparts its heat to other things. So if you cook your food, if you cook a pot of rice over a fire, the pot will become hot, the water in the pot will become hot, and that will cook the rice. And the rice, when you take it out of the pot, it's hot. But the rice is not inherently hot. The water is not inherently hot, intrinsically hot, that is. The pot is not intrinsically hot, but the fire is intrinsically hot. So the things that are not intrinsically hot borrow their heat from something else, and ultimately it must be derived from some source that is intrinsically hot. Likewise with existence. Anything that exists at one time and not at another time is not intrinsically existent. So it borrows its existence from something else. We can explain this very clearly in the light of Bhagavan's teachings. That is, everything that seems to exist In whose view does it seem to exist? Only in the view of ego. So this entire world and everything that we experience, all this multiplicity, all the thoughts, feelings, emotions, and all the objects of the world, they all exist in the view of ego. So they derive their seeming existence from ego. But is ego intrinsically existent? No, it is not, because it seems to exist in waking and dream. It doesn't seem to exist in sleep. So it comes into existence and it ceases to exist. So it's not intrinsically existent. So from where does ego derive its existence? From the one real existence, our own being, which is eternal. That is what we actually are, is Satchit. That Satchit is what shines as our being, I am. Ego borrows its seeming existence from this I am, because ego is the adjunct conflated awareness. I am this person, I am this body. So ego derives its seeming existence from I am. And everything else derives its seeming existence from ego. So the only thing that actually exists is I am, because it's the only thing that exists permanently. So I am is intrinsically existent. Everything else derives its existence. Well, ego derives its existence from I am, and everything else derives its seeming existence from ego, in whose view alone it seems to exist.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right. So the real existence, we can call it metaphysical existence if we want, but we need to give it that label. What exists permanently alone actually exists. This is a central teaching of Vedanta. A central insight of Vedanta.
So the label metaphysics is not important here. Just existence itself is enough.
Yes, yes. You've got existence, pure being, and you've got the existence of each thing. The existence of Sanjay, the existence of Michael, the existence of this table, the existence of this thing. Things that exist are not, they are borrowing their existence. There is only one thing that really exists, and that is I am. Everything else derives its seeming existence from the one real existence of I am. So aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
That's why Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yatatamai ulladu Atma-sarupa mondre. What actually exists is only Atma-sarupa. Atma-sarupa means the real nature of oneself. In other words, ourself as we actually are. What we actually are, that alone is what actually exists. Everything else derives its seeming existence from us.
So when we talk about existence, we are talking about Uladu. What actually exists.
Yes, what actually exists. Exactly, exactly. And that is what we are to investigate. Who am I? That am is the beingness.
Thank you, sir.
Sanjay, sort of your next question is, how would you describe Vedanta? Do you think Michael's has answered that, or perhaps Michael could elaborate because
Yeah. Okay. Vedanta literally means the end of the Vedas, but it's not just that. The original texts of Vedanta are the Upanishads, but they do tend to be the later portions of the Vedas, but they don't all come at the end of the Vedas. They're scattered throughout the Vedas, the Upanishads. But when it says the end, the anta in that context means the conclusion, the philosophical conclusion of the Vedas. Bhagavan has expressed it beautifully in, I think it's verse 99, if I remember correctly, of Aksharamlai. Vedantate Veda Vilangam Veda Porol Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala, graciously grant me the Veda Porol, the essence, the import of the Vedas, what the Vedas are all about, which shines in Vedanta without another. So he's there talking about the non-dual reality, the one without a second. That one without a second, it shines in Vedanta. So most of the Vedas are about rituals and the mantras to be recited during rituals. So, but the conclusion of Vedanta, that is in many of the Upanishads, if you study the Upanishads, you will find actually they're criticizing the ritualism of the Vedas. Because the ritualism of the Vedas has a place at a certain level. So long as people still have desires and they want their desires to be fulfilled, they're told, yes, you can fulfill your desires, but you have to do it in such and such a way, within such a... The Vedas are a way of containing people's desires, limiting the desires, allowing the desires to be fulfilled, but only when living according to Dharma, according to certain prescribed codes of conduct. So that is all. The ultimate aim of the earlier portion of the Vedas is to reduce our desires and eventually give up that desire. But the real heart of the real import of the Vedas is in Vedanta, which is the Upanishads. And there are three source texts of Vedanta. There's the Upanishads, which is called the Shruti. They have a Shruti. They come from the Vedas. There's the Brahma Sutras, which is called the Tarka, I think. That means the logic, the arguments. And there's the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Smriti, the later text. The Bhagavad Gita is a beautiful summary of all the philosophy of the Upanishads, and it's all summarized in the Bhagavad Gita. So these are the three main texts of Vedanta. But these texts all give room to be interpreted in many different ways, to suit the needs of different people. That's why there's so many different forms of Vedanta. One of those forms is Advaita, which we can say, I wouldn't say that is the only correct interpretation, because that means other interpretations are wrong. The other interpretations are also valid. They're suited to people at certain level of spiritual development. But we can say the deepest interpretation of Vedanta is Advaita. So Vedanta is a vast ocean. There's so many different. That is all the Ityasas, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and all the Puranas. They're all largely based on Vedanta. They're all expressions of Vedanta in all its myriad forms.
So Vedanta means believe in God. That is what I'm still not clear. How do we define it in one line?
We can't. There are so many ways you can define. One way of defining Vedanta is the Mahavakyas. So from an Advaitic point of view, the central import of Vedanta is Tattvamasi, you are that. What is that? That is Brahman. So you are the ultimate reality. That from an Advaitic perspective, that is the essence of Vedanta. But there are many other Vedantins who won't accept they will accept those Mahavakyas, but they'll give a different interpretation to them. Very creatively, they find some other, Madhvacharya is particularly creative in dismissing the Mahavakyas, in saying that they say what they don't say. But that's all suited to different people at different levels of spiritual development. So Vedanta is not something that can easily be defined. However, as Bhagavan implies in that verse of Aksharamala that I referred to, the ultimate import of Vedanta, the ultimate import of the Vedas is what shines in Vedanta as one without a second, without another, he says. That is ourself. So the ultimate import of Vedanta is knowing ourself as the one thing that actually exists.
So when we are studying Bhagavan's teachings, we are studying the essence of Vedanta, but it's more particularly Advaita.
Yes. We can say from our perspective, others won't agree with us, but we can say from our perspective, the cream of the Vedas is Vedanta. In fact, we can say Vedanta is actually, as a philosophy, it's the cream of all religions. The cream of Vedanta is Advaita, and the cream of Advaita is Bhagavan's teachings.
Oh, we are studying the...
But don't go and tell that to others because they'll get very angry with you. we can say that among ourselves, but if we go and tell people who follow other schools of Vedanta, they will say, no, you haven't understood at all. Vedanta's all about bhakti. Yes, we will agree Vedanta's all about bhakti, but what they mean by bhakti and what we mean by bhakti, essentially it's the same, but they interpret it in a somewhat different way. But they're more into the what Bhagavan refers to as Anya-bhava, taking God to be something other than themselves and worshipping him accordingly. That's good. At a certain level of spiritual development, that's the appropriate thing to do. But that's not the ultimate truth.
So one question, it's not related to this, that in the Shastras, sometimes they talk about Shakti Puja, means even Ram and Shiva, they did the Shakti Puja before some good event. Something of that sort. So what is that? Means even the gods do the...
that is in the Puranic stories. There are numerous stories in the Puranas, and all these stories have deep significance. So, for example, Rama worshipped Shiva in Rameshwaram before going to Lanka. Rama's God himself. Why does he need to worship? Actually, Rama and Shiva, of course, they're the same. Right? They're not. It's not that there are many different gods, but this is Rama is an avatar, and avatars come to show us how we should live. So he's setting an example by. He doesn't need to worship anything, but Rama and Shiva are one. They're not two, but outwardly he worships Shiva. There's a story in the Mahabharata. During the war, one night, instead of taking rest, Krishna told Arjuna, we have to go to Kailash. And he took Arjuna to Kailash. And what did Arjuna see at the feet of Shiva? What he had offered to Krishna that morning in his puja. The significance is that Shiva and Krishna are one. So ultimately, the message of Vedanta is oneness. But not everyone is ready to accept that in all its implications. So there are so many other forms of Vedanta that to suit people of different levels of spiritual development.
So by Shakti Puja, they are not gaining some extra power to kill the evil. That is not the thing.
Shakti and Shaktiman are one. Shaktiman means one who has power.
Mhm.
So God and his power are one. God and his grace are one.
Mhm.
Grace is not something other than God. Bhagavan, in this verse we saw today, Bhagavan addresses Aruṇācala as Amburu Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala is the very form of love. So God and his love are not two different things.
So like he doesn't need to increase his power or love. It is
He is infinite. He is infinite power, infinite love.
his infinite power and
But
infinite love.
all these Puranic stories, they're ways of conveying truth. They're very deep and subtle truths. They're very, we shouldn't dismiss the Puranas and the Itihasas as just stories. They're stories with very great significance. But
Yeah,
the significance we see in the story will depend upon how we see them. So according to the maturity, the spiritual maturity, each will see something different in the same story.
in the same story.
Sadhu Om was a brilliant storyteller. I used to listen to him telling stories of Ramana Mahabharata to children. And he would tell it in a way that was suited to the children. He would describe the strength of Bhima, and he would enact it all. And it was beautiful to watch him. After that, he would tell me, because he was telling in Tamil, so I could understand. At most days, I didn't understand Tamil so well. So I would ask him, what was that story? I didn't fully answer. Then he would tell me the same story, but he would bring out the deep philosophical significance of the story. So he would tell the story in a way that was suited to whoever he was telling it to.
In this context, when Rama did that puja at Rameshwaram, I think the priest was Ravana.
Maybe
Ravan was called as the priest.
Right. Well, Ravana was a great Shiva Bhakta.
Yeah.
But eventually he was destroyed by his egoism, because to be a true Shiva Bhakta, we need to subside. But Ravana thought he had gained so much power. He in Ramananda Saga's series on the Mahabharata, on the Ramayana, which was televised in the 1980s in India. Before Ravana goes out to fight with Rama, the day before he's killed, he goes and he does his Shiva Puja, and he's saying to Shiva, if you cannot blame me for my pride. You made me proud. You gave me all this power. So it's your fault that I'm proud. So it's beautiful the way he's talking to Shiva. You can see how, though he's a devotee of Shiva, he's so egotistical even when talking to Shiva. It was beautifully portrayed there. I can't remember exactly how it was expressed, but I remember it was beautifully portrayed. So even the demons will worship the gods, but they're worshipping for power. Power for their own selfish ends.
If we are pitted against someone who has got that nature like this Ravana, how do we tackle that person? There's a person, suppose, with the nature of an almost Ravana, and you are against.
There's no one who can deal with Ravana except Rama. So leave it to Rama. If you come across people like that, leave it to Bhagavan. He will take care of them. We're not here to fight evil. We're here not to fight evil in the external world. We're here to fight the evil in us, the rising of ego. Because the ultimate demon is this ego.
Our fight is not with the external Ravana, it's with the internal Ravana, which is ego.
Exactly, exactly.
That sums up the entire thing.
Yes, yes. In the verses Bhagavan wrote on the significance of Deepawali, he says Narakan, the demon who rules over Narakaloka, he is that which takes this body, who rules over Narakaloka. He describes the body as Narakaloka, as I am this body. So he's describing there, Naraka is nothing but ego. So ultimately all demons are nothing but ego.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right.
If there are any other questions, please do put them in the chat box. Sort of, Michael, what you're saying about the basic philosophy of oneness, that, there is this oneness and that not everybody is able to accept the implications of that. That is actually so true because one of the things, especially for people who are from the south and who happen to come from the Madhva, are aware of the Madhva Brahmins, the followers of Madhva. So there was a huge amount of sort of conflict, there was a lot of anti-Advaita.
Yes.
And the reason, apparently, according to Madhva friends of mine and people who've written on it, is that, in this thing of accepting oneness, there is also, yes, ultimately, but then it can have certain implications. It does have implications, even at an everyday level, that it's the same, a divinity everywhere, shall we say, or the same stuff, whatever one wishes to call it. And for the Madhavas, sort of caste, that sort of Brahmanical privilege was extremely important. And so, there was a great deal, there's a lot of attacks on Shankara. But actually, it was Ramanuja, I think, because of his Bhakti background, that who was that his followers were from the lower castes and so on, because it was that inclusivity of the South Indian sort of Bhakti movement. And you see how, before you have the various colonizations, you have these things automatically happening, that there is a resistance and, that in various kind of religious cultural forms, people do need to express themselves. But in any case, yes, this is a major thing. And then also, it was, in the same, and a lot of the thing against the Buddhists and Jains was also that, this dispute about caste. So because it's not so much that there are differences in thinking as such about the world or that there is something, it's more, I think there are a lot of social issues. Which lead to these conflicts. It's quite interesting.
All these things, the history of these things is very, very complex.
Yes, and very interesting in a way. This is how people, because,
Madhava is from Karnataka. And for him, this caste thing is so strong. But another movement in Karnataka is the Lingayats, the Veerashaivas. And they are they don't accept caste at all. They don't accept caste differences. They don't accept gender differences. They don't even believe that a woman shouldn't go into a temple when she's having her period. Because they say, if you've got love for Shiva in your heart, how can you be impure? So every Veerashaiva, they have a casket around their neck, which they wear around their neck with a Shiva linga in it. They call it, I think, the Atma-linga, and they worship that every day, men and women and children. So they're very, very egalitarian. And generally in all bhakti movements all over India, generally the bhakti movements are against, Ramanuja's a bit of an exception, because generally in the bhakti movements, it's very much against the caste discrimination. Some of the the stories in, for example, in the Pariya Puranam, the story of Nandana, who was an outcast, who wasn't allowed to go to the temple. And so eventually Nandi moved to one side so that he could see Shiva from outside.
But Michael, in the case of Ramanuja, he was against caste hierarchy, apparently.
I think so. No,
Yes,
sorry.
yes, very strongly.
No,
Because
it was
he was
Madhava, I think you said.
Madhava. Yes,
Yeah,
Madhava
so,
was.
did I
Yes.
say Ramanuja?
Yeah, but then Madhava, was he a bhakti? I'm not sure. I don't
He
know.
was he was very staunchly a bhakta.
Ah, okay.
But
Oh, he was a Vaishnava. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But he his philosophy is very strange. But he thinks that some souls can attain salvation, some souls can never attain salvation. And he thinks that there's some souls are male, some souls are female. So he's got so many, it's full of differences. Whereas most of the interpretations of Vedanta, including Vishishtadvaita, there's some form of Bheda Abheda, trying to reconcile difference with non-difference. But he doesn't accept non-difference at all. It's all totally Bheda.
It is interesting how people's personal preferences do influence their
exactly. Yeah. And another thing I've heard about, I heard one lady who is a follower of Ramanuja. She comes from one of those families, and she's an academic, and she was talking about the Ramanuja's philosophy, and she was saying, though Ramanuja's philosophy has been labeled as Dvaita, it's actually not just Dvaita. He's a pluralist. He believes in many. I mean, he doesn't believe in just two. He believes in many fundamental distinctions.
Are there any questions from anyone? We have a little bit of time.
Michael, I have one question. No, not even a
Yes.
question. Yeah. About this topic of Mars, which
Yes.
we were discussing here. Manikavasagar got enlightened in Tirupperanturai,
Yes.
in the Atmanatha temple,
Yes.
where the seer, the seeing, and the seen, all three got disappeared.
Yes.
And Bhagavan even told in the talks that he merged into a light or something.
Yes.
That was the Nayanmars, the Tiruvasagam, and all these things are like the epitome of this bhakti for Shiva, the
Yes.
subsidence back in the self. It was all clear until this invasion, new religion, all these things started to over-dominate in the caste and in the poverty, everything started to rule in, and it
Yes.
created the ruckus and chaos there. Michael, when you're talking about Madhava and all, there were souls. He said there were like souls, but when Bhagavan was asked, "Who are you, Bhagavan?" Bhagavan answered, "Ariyatidara Jivara Dahavari Jaguhayil Arivairami Paramatman in the Arunachala Ramanan." But that is, he is the supreme spirit, the universal Paramatma that is dwelling in the heart, starting from the highest of the high, Sri Hari, to the lowest of the low, the insect or anything. So there is only one soul, and there is only just one, right? Not even oneness at that level, isn't it, Michael?
We can't say that not even oneness. There is one. It's ekameva advaitam. It's one only without a second. There's it is the ultimate truth is that there is one. There's
Not even oneness. Just one.
Yes.
So each one, there is a soul that doesn't, because in the sleep, it is boundless. It has no attributes. It has nothing.
Yeah, but what is boundless in sleep is boundless even now. That is what we actually are.
Yes.
That is Atma-swarupa, the real nature of ourself.
So,
but when we rise as ego, we impose seeming limitations on ourselves. And so once we've limited ourselves, all the differences arise. When there's no limitation, there are no differences. Because that which is one without a second, it is not only, when it said not, it is not only infinite, it is also akhanda. When Bhagavan, in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiya, Bhagavan says, when one knows what the nature of oneself is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless, because it didn't start in some time, it's ever existing. Ananta means without end, but without end means in the sense of without limit. So it's got no limits. That which is truly unlimited, it not only has no external limits, it's got no internal limits. If something is divided, like India, it's got external limits, the borders of the coastline and the borders of India. It's also got internal limits. It's divided up into so many different states. So that is limited. Something which is truly unlimited, which is truly ananta, has neither external limits nor internal limits. So it's not divided. So that's why he says akhanda. Akhanda means unbroken. It means it cannot be divided into, it cannot be separated. There can be no parts to it. So according to the Madhva's philosophy, everything is Vishnu. But we are all parts of Vishnu. We are not the whole. So that's why it's called Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-duality. But Bhagavan is unqualified non-duality. There is only the whole, there are no parts. The parts are just appearances. The whole alone exists.
Thank you.
And Bhagavan said about Veda, because as I said, most forms of most interpretations of Vedanta are some form of Veda. They accept non-difference, but they also accept differences. They may not call themselves Veda. Vishishtadvaita distinguishes itself from Veda, but it is essentially, it is trying to reconcile differences and with non-difference. But Bhagavan put it very plainly. He said, if you've got differences, you don't have non-difference. If you've got non-difference, then there's no room for differences. So Bhagavan though Bhagavan will modify his teachings, he'll talk to people at a way that is suitable for their level of understanding, but when he's expressing his own teachings, he's uncompromisingly it's uncompromising in fact that there are no differences. All differences are just in appearance. They appear only in the view of ego. When ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So the differences are all vivata. It's all just an appearance. What actually exists is only one without a second. And we are that. So to know that as it is, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. And to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to turn our attention within. So all this philosophy is useful to the extent to which it prompts us to look within. And Advaita can be realized, that non-duality can be experienced only by complete surrender. And complete surrender requires all-consuming love. And that complete surrender can be effectuated only by turning within and seeing ourselves as we actually are. Because ego is a false awareness of ourself. Awareness of ourself as something other than what we actually are. So long as we rise as ego, we cannot experience Advaita. So we need to put an end to the rising of ego. As Bhagavan says in verse 27 of Ulludunapadu, Nanudiyada ullanile, namaduvai ullanile. The state in which I does not rise, the state in which I is without rising, is the state in which we are that. So to experience ourselves as that, to experience ourselves as Brahman, we need to cease rising as ego. So how to cease rising as ego? He explains in the next sentence, without investigating the place where I rises, how to attain the annihilation of oneself, Tannairape, in which I does not rise. That's a rhetorical question. That clearly means without investigating what we actually are, we cannot attain that annihilation of ourself in which we don't rise as ego. And without attaining that, we cannot experience ourselves as that, as Brahman. So that is, duality is an appearance, and it's an inevitable appearance so long as we rise as ego. We can put an end to the appearance of duality only by putting an end to the rising of ego. And we can put an end to the rising of ego only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. Because ego is a false awareness of ourselves, it can be destroyed only by correct awareness of ourselves. And for that, all-consuming love is required. And that is what Bhagavan is praying for in this second verse. In the first verse, he's praying to see Aruṇācala as he actually is. That means to see ourselves as we actually are, because Aruṇācala is what we actually are. But for that, we need love. So in this verse, second verse, he prays for that love. And in the next verse, he prays for the annihilation of himself, which is the result of the fruit of that love is the annihilation of ourself. And the annihilation of ourself and seeing ourselves as we actually are one and the same thing. You can't have one without the other.
Even now, it is pure. The only thing is the chit jada granthi. It's making us have that. There is the body appears as an
chit
image of
is
the mind.
ever pure, ever unbound. But it seems from the perspective of ourself as ego, but this chit is bound to is tied up with this jada. But it's only in the view of ego that granthi is there. In the view of chit, there never was any granthi, never could be any granthi.
There is one more question, Michael.
Yes, okay.
Actually, there are two more. So the first one is, can Michael elaborate on how the seer is the seen? I can understand the seer is the one who is seeing, but how is the seer also the seen? Thank you, Michael.
What Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulludunapadu is not that the seer is the seen, but that the seen is the seer. Well, yeah, okay, it amounts to saying the ego is, that is, everything that we see is just a modification of our awareness, so to speak. It's an impression. It's an impression in the mind. But the mind, since the mind has no existence independent of ego, that is, ego is the essence of the mind, and all the perceptions, all the memories, or everything experienced by ego is just modifications or impressions in its awareness. So it has no existence independent of ego. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulludunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Note that he doesn't say when ego comes into existence. He says if ego comes into existence, because but ultimately we will find that ego has never come into existence. But now it seems to us that ego has come into existence, and because ego seems to have come into existence, everything else seems to have come into existence. That is, when we wake up in the morning or begin to dream, we rise as ego and we project all this. So if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahande indrel indruanatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ahande yavamam. Ego itself is everything. That is, what ego sees as this world and all these wars and famines and life and birth and death and all these, everything, all this multiplicity, it's all nothing but ego. Ego sees itself, just like the dreaming mind. The dream is nothing other than the dreaming mind. The dreaming mind sees itself as the dream. So ego is seeing itself as all this multiplicity. That's why he says ego itself is everything. So in terms of your question, ego is the seer. Everything is seen. That what is seen has no existence independent of what is of the seer. It's the seer is seeing itself as the seen. But the most important sentence in that verse 26 is the final sentence in which he says, Adalal, therefore, Yadu idu entru nadale overdal yavamenor. Therefore, know that investigating what this is giving up everything. What does he mean by investigating what this is? He means investigating what this ego is. And why is investigating what ego is giving up everything? Because as he explained in the previous verse, Tedina autum piticum, if sought, it takes flight. That is, if we investigate this ego, if we look to see what this ego is, ego will subside and dissolve back into its source. When ego dissolves, everything else dissolves along with it. That is why all-consuming love is required. Because until we are ready to give up everything, we will not be willing to go deep enough in this investigation. We'll look inside a little, just like peering over the edge of a cliff, but we won't lean far enough to fall over. So we very cautiously look inside ourselves because we're not yet ready to let go of everything else. So we have to have all-consuming love to know and to be what we actually are. Then only we will really look within and see what we actually are. Because seeing what we actually are is giving up everything. That's why Advaita without Bhakti is just a lifeless philosophy. It's just ideas. It's not going to benefit us at all. Advaita is first and foremost, it's an extremely practical philosophy. It denies the reality of multiplicity, but merely denying the reality of multiplicity is not doing us any good so long as we experience that multiplicity. So how to put an end to the experience of multiplicity? We have to put an end to the experiencer, namely ego. And then we will experience ourselves as one only without a second. That is what Advaita is all about.
There are two more questions, Michael. So the first one is from Uladu Narpadu, and it's a quotation. Since we know the world, we must concede for both a common source, single, but with the power of seeming many. A quotation over. This power of seeming many sounds like we are being tested within the world of appearances. To that extent, this implies choice. To get swept away by the power of the many, or to hold to the truth of a single source. Has Bhagavan said anything about being tested between a seeming two and about this ultimate discrimination or choice.
Yes, it's all about choice. That is, Bhagavan never gave any teachings of his own accord. He gave teachings in answer to question, because so long as we want to continue going outwards and experiencing this multiplicity, we have that freedom that is our real nature is infinite freedom, because we alone exist. So even when we rise as ego, we are still free, but our freedom is limited, because by rising as ego, we impose limitations on ourselves. So by rising as ego, our existence seems to be limited to the existence of this body. Our awareness seems to be limited to what we are able to see through the five senses. Our happiness seems to be limited to a little bit of happiness here and there, amidst the opposite of happiness, which is misery. So all these limitations we impose upon ourselves. So in the same way, our freedom is limited, but we are always limited. We are always free. So it's up to us to use our freedom correctly. The wise way to use our freedom is to turn within and surrender ourselves completely. The foolish way to use our freedom is what we're all doing, which is jumping outwards, looking for happiness in the external world. So it's all a matter of choice. It's not exactly testing us. Bhagavan doesn't need to test us. He knows that is, as a devotee, we can talk about testing. Bhagavan sings, Sudu sedenne, Chodya dinium jyotirukata, without that we can take that as testing. Without testing me by playing tricks, show me your form of light. But it's not really that God needs to test us. God knows very well our present state without needing to test us. But he gives us this freedom of choice. But though he gives us this freedom of choice, he works within, in the form of grace, to slowly enkindle in our heart the discrimination between the eternal and the ephemeral. He enables us to see the defect in all these ephemeral things, so we slowly develop vairagya, there's freedom from desire for all these things, and he thereby enkindles in our heart the love. So his grace is doing everything silently, working from within. But the choice is that is, grace is working to give us the clarity so that we make the correct choice. But the choice is always ours. Bhagavan will never kill us until we are willing to be killed by him. Until we are willing to surrender ourselves completely, he will not impose liberation upon us. He will not impose jnana upon us until we want it wholeheartedly, want it and want nothing else whatsoever. So his grace is always helping us by working within, giving us the clarity to see the defects in all these so-called pleasures of the world. And slowly we lose the desire for them, and we gain the desire to know and to be what we actually are by completely surrendering ourselves. And incidentally, that translation of the first verse of Ulladu that you read, it's not a very accurate translation. I'll just read a more accurate translation. What he says in this verse is, Namo Lahum Khandalal. That literally means because of we seeing the world. In other words, because we see the world. Why does he begin with the words, because we see the world? If in sleep we don't see the world, there's no problem. There's just one only without a second. But as soon as we rise as ego, we see a world and we have a problem. So since we see the world, he doesn't say we have to accept, because not everyone is willing to accept that there's one. But what he says is, Nanavam Shakti Ulla O Mudule Oppal Orutaleye. Orutaleye here, according to my understanding, it means it's the one best option. That is, there are many ways of interpreting this. In the next verse, he talks about other ways of interpreting this. He talks about different, he says, all the religions, all schools of thought, all schools of Vedanta, we can say, put it simply, accept three original things. That implies God, world, and soul. But there are different views about these. One thing is all three things, or three things are always three things. Arguing like that is possible only so long as ego exists. This ego dying, the state, being in our own state is best. So from this verse, it's clear that he accepts. There are different ways of interpreting this. For some people, like for Madhvacharya, the three are always three. World, soul, and God are always separate. They're always three. So they can never become one. So Bhagavan isn't saying that we have to accept this. He just says this is the best option. So accepting one fundamental that has a power that becomes many is certainly the one best option. That is, who sees the world? We see it. We are one and we are seeing many. So the reasonable conclusion is that the one is seeing itself as many. That's the implication. Then he concludes this verse by saying, the picture of names and forms, that's all this myriad phenomena, the one who sees, namely ego, the cohesive screen, that is, all these appear on a screen, and they all appear in a certain light. The light is awareness, and the screen is also awareness. All these are he, who is oneself. Anakinam tanam avan. Tanam means who is oneself. He refers here to that one fundamental, that one first thing. So this Bhagavan says this is the best option. But just because this is the best option doesn't mean we should go arguing with others. If people prefer to think that God, world, and soul are always in existence, let them believe that, so long as they want to believe it. Sooner or later, they'll be dissatisfied with that, and they'll look for something deeper. So that's why he says, arguing whether the one appears as many, or whether one appears as three, or that the three are always three, is possible only so long as the ego exists. Destroying this ego and being as we actually are, that is best. And then in the next verse, he goes on to talk about other disputes that people have. The world is real. No, it's a false appearance. The world is awareness. It's not. The world is happiness. It is not. What is the use of disputing thus? Leaving the world, tanne ondu, investigating and knowing oneself, ondru irendru tanatru, one and two ceasing, that's nana atra annile elakum opuam. That state in which I has perished is agreeable to all. So we're not here. If other people want to believe other things, there are so many interpretations of Vedanta. There are so many people who don't accept Vedanta at all. They may be atheists, or they may be materialists, or whatever. We're not here to argue with people. The wise thing is to leave the world be as it is, to turn within, investigate ourselves, thereby put an end to this appearance of duality and non-duality, go beyond these two to be in the state in which I has perished. That is what is agreeable. That is what Uludunaptu is all about. And that is also what Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam is all about. It's all about this love to put an end to this appearance of multiplicity and to be the one that we actually are, the one without a second.
This is the last question for today. It's from Tony. Tony, you wanted to ask a question? Yeah.
Yeah. Hello again, Michael. A quick question.
Yes.
It kind of brings us back full circle to Aruṇācala and a clockwise circle, I hope. But a quick refresher from you. I remember you saying, and apologies if I'm misquoting you or indeed Bhagavan, but Arunami is Satchitananda and Achala is solid, immovable.
Yes, yes.
I just wanted to, if you
that is
there is time, just a quick refresher on the immovable Shiva part of it.
That is, pure being is immutable. It is silent. That's when Bhagavan talks about silence, he's not just talking about vocal silence or physical silence. He's not even talking about mental silence. He's talking about the eternal silence of pure being. So silence and immovability are one and the same. So in the name Aruṇācala, Achala stands for that immovability, that solidness, that he uses the word, this is verse 2 of Aruṇācala Navamanimalai, which we talked about some months ago, sometime last year. He explains the significance of this name Aruna, or Aruṇācala. He first says, Aruṇācala means Satya Chit Sukham, that's Satchidananda. That is Aruna. In Tamil and Sanskrit, and most Indian languages, they have syllabic alphabets. So they don't count the, in Latin-based languages, we have separate consonants, separate vowels. So we count the letters like that. But in Tamil and Sanskrit and other Indian languages, they're syllabic. So the number of syllables. So Aruna is 3 syllables. A-ru-na. So these 3 represent Sat, Chit, Ananda, or as he puts it there, for poetic reasons, he put it as Satya, Chit, Sukham. That means Satchitananda. Not only Satchit, besides that, it also means Paravuyasarayakam, the oneness of the Supreme and the Soul. In other words, what in Sanskrit is called Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. That is, this Jiva is nothing other than Brahman. That is the meaning of Tattvamasi. Again, we've got 3. Tattvamasi. Tat is Brahman. Tvam is you. Asi is the oneness. This is the meaning of Aruna. And the meaning of Achala is Ganam. Ganam means solid. What is, it implies what is, there's nothing so solid as being. Pure being is everything else comes and goes. Everything else is perishable, but pure being, pure awareness is solid. It's metaphorically speaking, obviously, it's the one thing which is immovable. Achala means immovability. That's why a mountain is called Achala, because it's something immovable, at least relatively immovable. So the Aruṇācala represents that immovability of Satchidananda, which and the immovability of the truth of Parajiva, that is Brahma Jivaikya, Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of Brahman and Jiva. So he said, when we consider the name Aruṇācalam, which gives liberation when thought of, this is the significance of it. In that verse, Bhagavan is indirectly giving us all mantra diksha. That is, Bhagavan never gave initiation. He said initiation is not necessary. But some people like to have a mantra from the Guru. So because Bhagavan is the perfect Guru, he gives something for everyone. So if we all want a mantra from Bhagavan, that mantra is Aruṇācala. And because when a Guru gives a mantra to a disciple, the traditional way of doing it, they have to explain the significance of every syllable or every sound. And they also have to give what is the fruit of meditating on that mantra. So what is the fruit of meditating on Aruṇācala? Mukti nineka varol Aruṇācala munnidave. That is, when we think of it, it will give mukti. So Bhagavan, in that verse, he has openly given mantra diksha to all of us. So if anyone wants a mantra from Bhagavan, he's given us Aruṇācala.
And it's immovable because Satchitananda, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's our
Exactly.
true self.
Yeah. Everything else comes and goes, but the one thing that never comes and goes is Satchitananda, which is ever shining in our heart as I.
Thank you. Very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Should we end then now, Michael?
Yes, if no more questions.
No, there aren't any more. I think it's a good place to end
Right.
with the mantra. We'll do Bhagwan's mantra together, and thank you so much, Michael. It was a wonderful session. Thank you.
Right.
Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya.
Sorry, this is a question about the Sri Chakra Puja. Bhagavan never asked anyone to install a Sri Chakra there. Actually speaking, installing a Sri Chakra there is not very appropriate, because Metaphysics temple is a temple built over the samadhi of a jnani. Bhagavan very clearly indicated that his mother had attained mukti. So she merged in jnana. So the reason temples are built over the samadhi of jnanis is that the body is a temple of God. The body in which the ego is destroyed, that's a temple of God. So according to the Tamil Shaiva tradition, the body of jnanis are buried, and temple, or at least some sort of shrine, is built over it. So that is why the temple was built there. So the power that is in that temple is the power of jnana, which is the ultimate power. The reason Sri Chakras are installed in temples is to give the temple power. But there's no need to give power to the samadhi of a jnani. So putting a Sri Chakra on her samadhi is not appropriate, because it's trying to give power to the original power, the power of jnana. So, but people have many different beliefs. And also for some people, worshipping Sri Chakra is part of their livelihood. So anyway, people told Chinnaswamy that the temple wouldn't be complete if it didn't have a Sri Chakra. Chinnaswamy is a simple person. He doesn't know about all these things. He believes what people tell him. So because he was told that he should install a Sri Chakra there, he said, okay, yes, install a Sri Chakra. Bhagavan never Bhagavan didn't either approve of it or disapprove of it. If when Bhagavan was living on the hill, children used to come up at the time of Deepawali, they used to come up and play fireworks with Bhagavan. He would play fireworks with them. Sometimes small girls will come and bring their dolls to Bhagavan and show him their dolls. He will play with the dolls with them. Bhagavan plays, that is, Bhagavan treats everyone at the appropriate level at which they are. So if people want to do Vedic recitation, okay, let them do Vedic recitation. If they want to do Sri Chakra Puja, let them do Sri Chakra Puja. But it has nothing to do with Bhagavan's teachings. The greatness of Aruṇācala, as Bhagavan points out in the, or that is one of the greatnesses of Aruṇācala, is Bhagavan points out in the first verse of Aruṇācala Navamani Malai. There he says, that verse was written in connection with a story. That is, there was a Dikshita, a priest or a member of the priestly families of Chidambaram, who used to sometimes visit Tiruvannamalai. And whenever he visited, he tried to persuade Bhagavan to come to Chidambaram. And he would always talk about the greatness of Chidambaram. And one day he said to Bhagavan that among the Panchabhuta lingas, among the lingas of the 5 elements, the Aruṇācala is the Agni Linga and Chidambaram is the Akasa Linga. That is Aruṇācala is the fire linga, Chidambaram is the space linga. So all the other elements emerge from space and merge back into space. So space is the greatest of the elements, therefore Chidambaram is the ultimate Shiva, etc., was his argument. Bhagavan then pointed out that in Chidambaram, Shakti is dancing, and Lord Shiva has to dance before her in order to bring her dance to a standstill. Whereas in Tiruvannamalai, she comes and she merges in him through love. And so Bhagavan said, therefore, the place that is all these 5 elements emerge from Shakti. So that more significant than the place where the elements merge is the place where Shakti herself merges. Many years later, when Bhagavan told this incident, actually it was in 1928 when he was composing Ulutanapu, Bhagavan narrated this incident, and then he wrote a verse in which he summarized his answer. In that verse he says, though he is Achala, he's motionless by nature, in Chidambaram, Lord Shiva dances in front of the Divine Mother, implying to bring her dance to a standstill. But in Tiruvannamalai, that Shakti merges, that Shakti subsides, and therefore Aruṇācala, Ongam Aruṇācalam, Aruṇācalam shines supreme, is the implication. So Aruṇācala is a place where the Shakti merges in Shiva. So Aruṇācala is not only Shiva Swarupa, it is also Ardhanarishwara. Ardhanarishwara is the form of Shiva that is half Shiva and half Shakti, because Shiva and Shakti have become one in Aruṇācala. So there's no separate Shakti. So in this place where Shakti has merged back into where the power has merged back into its source, which is Aruṇācala, worshipping Shakti there as a separate thing is unnecessary. And the merging of Shakti, what that signifies is the merging of ego back into its source. That is, Shakti is both the power of grace and the power of Maya. So long as we rise as ego and go outwards, she functions in the form of Maya. But when we have love to turn back within, she functions in the form of grace, which draws us back within. That is what Ramakrishna Paramahamsa called Vidya Maya and Avidya Maya. Avidya Maya is Maya in the usual sense of it, the Maya that is deluding us. Vidya Maya is the grace that draws us back within. So in the place where that Shakti merges with Shiva, to install a Sri chakra, which is specifically, it's just not at all appropriate. But Bhagavan, of course, has no objection to anything. If anyone wants to do anything, let them do it. So Bhagavan didn't object to it, but I think it would be very hard to justify it in terms of Bhagavan's teachings, why there should be a Sri chakra there. Why is it necessary? I mean, some people are Shakta. They like to worship the goddess, and they like to do all this Sri chakra is a very, for the tantrikas, this is a very powerful symbol. It's a very powerful, it has a lot of significance for the Shaktas, but in the context of Bhagavan's teachings and in the context of Aruṇācala, all this is irrelevant. So, as I say, that may not be the answer that you were looking for, but that is that's my view on it. I don't think it really has anything to do with Bhagavan at all. Does that sound a reasonable answer or unreasonable?
I think they're just different perspectives, isn't it?
It is different perspective. Okay, I absolutely agree with that. So everyone is entitled to their own perspective. If other people think it has some significance, that's fine. But
Yeah,
to me,
there was something on YouTube from the ashram. There's something about the Sri Chakra thing, and I mean, I just put it on because I like watching things at the ashram.
Yeah.
Then there was this whole commentary on the installation of, I don't know, whatever the image of the Sri Chakra and all that, and what Bhagavan to do with it, and how he had looked at and done certain things. I don't know, there was just a whole thing on it. So that's why I was just sort of curious what it was about. Yeah, and people, I think, often, like even I think about Bhagavan's mother. There is the thing that at the end of her life, he placed his hand on her heart, was it?
On her heart, and I
Yes,
think on her heart and her head.
yes, and that was,
Yeah.
you know, and that was quite a crucial thing, an important thing, and it says something about the nature of the heart and the nature of, I don't know, the relationship with the body or something. So I think there are all these different perspectives and emphases, I guess. Yeah.
But I'm afraid I'm a bit of a purist. I stick just strictly to Bhagavan's teachings. I've not got a problem with any of these things, but I just don't see any relevance of this to Bhagavan's teachings.
I don't know whether it's about teaching. I guess it's more about life, that all of us, you know, we have so many different needs, and you know, at different points in time, and different things are helpful. We go to the ashram, but everybody does a pradakshina sort of within, so to speak, you know, around the samadhi. Now, one would say, well, why is, you know, I mean, these are all just ways of a kind of becoming closer, more intimate. If people find, you know, if you stay there for a while, then the Vedic chanting and the Tamil Parayana and all of that, you know, it's something which you know, it becomes very meaningful. The first time you go, it's not necessarily so. And that also has an effect. So it's, I think it's just as human beings, we're so much more than, you know, we have all these.
That's why Bhagavan gave everyone freedom to do whatever they want.
Some people are more academic and cerebral, others are more sort of feeling oriented, and you know, we're all quite different. So
that is why Vedanta caters for everyone.
Exactly.
It's got something for everyone.
I remember one of these Jains when I was teaching at SOAS. He belonged to the Murti Pujak, which is, you know, because the Jains have both the, you know, sort of the non-temple goers and the temple goers. They have both, I mean, they have huge numbers of different sects. And he began saying, but you know, he just said, you know, but in the sort of in the non-temple, the
Yeah.
non-murti, the non-idol, he said, but there's no rasa. You need rasa. The rasa is
Yes.
sort of the flavor, the juice, the
Yeah,
feeling
yeah.
you know, of devotion, of bhakti, that kind of
Yes.
thing. So, you know, this and but I noticed that even with the anaconic, because I taught those courses, so I knew them. Sort of the nuns, they incorporate aspects of the devotional. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, everybody does, you know, and they incorporate
yeah.
all the you know, I think it's impossible to be completely devoid of,
Yes.
you know, it's a very human thing. People, you know, there's
Yes.
some contribution everywhere.
Yes.
Anyway.
But even if you look at, I mean, they chant the Chandi during the Sri Chakra Puja, and if Matri Rupena Samstita, Namaste, I mean, that's got Advaita built into it, in fact. Everything is the form of that power.
Yes.
Yeah, even the Sri Chakra, I mean, ultimately it is the Shiv Shakti thing. I mean, it is sort of oriented towards oneness, I guess, everything, yeah. Yeah, it's a matter of what appeals,
Yes, okay.
I guess. And I don't know much about it. That's why I was asking. I thought you might know much more than I do about it. So it's just, yeah.
Well, as you say, we all have our own views, so I just shared my view.
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
Did the Sri Chakra get installed after the temple was inaugurated? Do you know, Michael?
No,
Or
it was
same time.
Same time. It was during the Kumbhabhishekam that it was inaugurated.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing on YouTube about it, Chris. There's like
And I
20
think
minutes
Chadwick,
or an
Bhagavan drew Chadwick's attention to it because he wanted Chadwick to keep the Veda Padasala going. And
That is another story. That is when at the time of the Kumbhabhishekam, Bhagavan was already his health was already deteriorating at that time, and they wanted to do this elaborate Sri Chakra. This was the first Sri Chakra puja, and they wanted Bhagavan to be present. So Bhagavan was there in the shrine. And in the shrines, it's a small enclosed space, and it was very hot. And Bhagavan was patiently standing there, but it must have been quite, from a normal human perspective, of course, Bhagavan is unaffected by all these things, it would have been quite difficult standing there in that heat. Obviously, Bhagavan is not affected by it. But after it was all over, when Bhagavan was coming down the steps, some of the priests said to Bhagavan, "Oh, Bhagavan, this was so glorious. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had this Sri Chakra Puja on a regular basis?" And Bhagavan said, "Who will take it on their head?" But the tone in which he said that means, who will bother for this? Chadwick, who was there, asked, "What did Bhagavan say?" Then someone told him, "Oh, we told Bhagavan how grand this was, and wouldn't it be grand to have this on a regular basis?" And Bhagavan said, "Yes, but who will take responsibility for it?" So Chadwick said, "I'll take responsibility, Bhagavan," because he didn't understand the tone with which Bhagavan said that. So Chadwick believed that Bhagavan wanted him to do that, so he did it. That's fine, but it wasn't exactly what Bhagavan meant. But some people will say that was what Bhagavan meant. So, but this is something that there were always differences of opinion about this. But we are not, those who want to worship the Sri Chakra, that's fine. But for many of us, it has no particular significance. Just like the ashram, people say Bhagavan's ashram. Bhagavan never considered it his ashram. The ashram grew up around him. It was built by the devotees for the convenience of devotees. For many years, Bhagavan lived just as a beggar. So Bhagavan had no desire for this ashram. He had no no sense of that it's my ashram. That it's in fact, there's one interesting incident that happened at the time. I think this was before the Kumbhabhishekam for the Atma-vichara temple, but it was while the construction was going on. And it was on some day when there was some significant puja being conducted. And that puja was taking longer than usual. So the paradasis, paradesi literally means outsiders, the people who come and receive poor feeding when the poor feeding is done every day. They were waiting for their food and it was delayed. So they became rather impatient, and some of them were saying, when are we going to get our food, or whatever. Chinnaswami heard the commotion, so he came out and he said in a loud voice, paradasis will be fed afterwards. Unknown to Chinnaswami, this was overheard by Bhagavan. So Bhagavan quietly slipped out of the ashram and went and sat under a tree in Palakottu. So when the puja was over and the dining hall bell rang, everyone was looking, where is Bhagavan? Nobody knew where Bhagavan had gone. So people were sent out to search for Bhagavan, and they found him in Palakottu, and they said, Bhagavan, the dining hall bell has rung, and everyone's waiting for you. Bhagavan said, no, you all go and eat. I'll just stay here. They went back to Chinnaswami and said, Bhagavan said everyone should eat and he'll remain there. But Chinnaswami obviously can't start feeding people when Bhagavan isn't there. So he wondered, he thought maybe Bhagavan is unwell. So he sent two devotees who were doctors to go and ask Bhagavan whether he was okay. And they went and asked Bhagavan, is your tummy upset or anything? Bhagavan said, no, I'm fine. You go and eat. And I don't know, the story is perhaps elaborated, slightly embellished, but anyway, the version I heard is that when the two doctors came back to Chinnaswami and said, Bhagavan says there's nothing wrong with him, but he told us all to eat. Then Chinnaswami sent two lawyers, thinking the lawyers will be able to persuade Bhagavan. And then they went to Bhagavan. And when Bhagavan said, no, you all go and eat, they said, but Bhagavan, why aren't you coming to eat? Then Bhagavan said, Chinnaswami's orders. Chinnaswami said paradasis will be fed afterwards. I am also a paradesi. So they went back and reported this to Chinnaswami. He then understood Bhagavan had overheard him. So he said, feed the paradasis first. And then they sent messengers back to Bhagavan saying that paradasis are now being fed. Bhagavan said, okay, then I will also come. And he came back. So that illustrates that Bhagavan considered himself just to be an outsider. Though the ashram had grown up around him, he never considered that Bhagavan had no sense of I am mine. He had no mamakara, no. So he considered himself just to be an outsider. So many things that happened in the ashram and around the ashram, we can't take it Bhagavan approved of everything. That is, Bhagavan just lets everyone do their own thing. Very seldom does he intervene, and he intervenes only when it is necessary.
I think when Chinnaswami was beating the mango tree to get the mangoes down.
I think that wasn't Chinnaswami, that was just some of the workers in the ashram. They were with long sticks, they were beating branches to get the mangoes to fall. And Bhagavan objected to that. He said, this tree is giving us fruit. Why should we punish it by beating it? But whenever Bhagavan intervened, it was always to give some teaching. Give some teaching in the sense there was always a significance in what he said.
Well, that's a living teaching when such an example is,
exactly.
more living than many.
And he also said when people tried to drive away the monkeys when they came to take the mangoes, Bhagavan said, we are the outsiders. We came and invaded their space. They were here long before us. Someone, I think, said, when Bhagavan told, let the monkeys be, let them have it. But Bhagavan, they're stealing the mangoes. Bhagavan said, how can you say they're stealing? We have come to their place. They're taking what was always theirs. And we say, no, these are ours. They're stealing from us. Did God say that these are your mangoes and not the monkey's mangoes? The monkeys have every bit as much right as you have.
And they're looked after. They never go to a doctor. They never go to a shop. Of course, well, they do go to shops, but
well, nowadays, yes.
Yeah. And they're looked after.
Yeah.
Michael, when Bhagavan was saying during the last moments that where can I go? I'm here. On those words.
Yeah.
It means it is achala. It's immovable, right? Like when the experience happened on 16th year on 16 years.
Yeah.
Since then, Bhagavan doesn't even had the body or the
Yes.
mind. He was always that immovable achala that was always present. And the people thought
Hokum Varavamilada Poduveli. He
Okay.
refers to in Aksharamulai. He's the common space, the open space that is devoid of coming and going.
But the people thought, like even at the last moment, that he was that body and he was leaving.
Yeah.
That's
When he said, why are you weeping? Bhagavan, you're leaving us. He said, where can I go? I am always here. When he says, I am always here, superficially we can interpret it. He's always present in Tiruvannamalai. He's always
The
present in
ashram.
Ramashram. That is also true. But Murugan has sung in Ramana Sannidhu Murai, the whole universe is Ramanashram. Because there's not a single place in the universe where Bhagavan isn't present. Because he's the underlying reality of the whole appearance. So when he says, I am always here, he means, by here, he means, it does include Ramanashram, it does include Tiruvannamalai, and of course Bhagavan is very specially present there in the form of Aruṇācala, in the form of his shrine in Tiruvannamalai, but he's also present in the heart of each one and every one of us. He is the I in the heart of each of us. So where can he go? Everything else comes and goes. One thing that is eternal, ever present, omnipresent, present everywhere, at all times, in all places, that is Bhagavan. So for Bhagavan, the presence or absence of a body is so insignificant because he knew his grace is, the power of his grace is, that is, some people think that a living guru is necessary because Bhagavan is no longer living, because they take Bhagavan to be the body, but Bhagavan's grace is in no way limited to the lifetime of his body. His grace is infinite. His grace is the eternal reality. It always was and it always will be. So whether the body is present or not is irrelevant to Bhagavan. He's ever present.
When I go to the gym, Michael, like I just remember all this talks that we have in the Zoom, and then still going to the gym to take care of the body, this chit jada granthi, and
we're all taking care of the body from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. We are constantly doing puja to this body. We give it abhishekam, we offer it naivedya in the form of food. So when people criticized idol worship, Bhagavan said, what are you doing? You're worshipping this idol of a body as if it was yourself. What are they doing in temples? They are treating that vigraha as God. And if God comes to your house, won't you give him, offer him water for a bath? Won't you offer him food? Won't you offer him nice clothes and flower gardens and everything? So you're treating the whole idea of this temple worship, you're treating the idol as the presence of God and treating it accordingly. That puja is not wrong. The puja we do to this body with the mistaken notion, I am this body, that is what is wrong. Bhagavan says, if you can give up this puja, you can give up that puja. But so long as you're doing this puja, don't criticize that puja.
I just have a quick comment. There are a lot of comments in the chat section. And I think that one thing which is often forgotten is that, I mean, I did not grow up doing rituals or pujas, or going to temples. I've never done this because in the north it's also much less than in the south. So whatever. But I believe the idea behind doing all these is to concentrate the mind and to take you inward, right? So I think to think of these things, but of course, for many people, there can be distractions for people. It's enough to just go and ask for something in a temple or whatever it is. But the idea behind all of these rituals and pujas and devotion and all that is that it focuses the mind. It takes us inward, whether it's yoga, for example, I don't do yoga, but I'm not going to denounce somebody for doing it because it can be helpful if you do it the right way, I imagine, to take you inward. So I think, that too much of this thing of this is distracting, because I was looking at something from Ganapati Muni and those dialogues he had with Bhagwan, and Bhagwan says, look, there are three parts. So, according to where one is at, one may do certain things. If one finds something distracting, don't do it. But I don't think that gives me, I mean, I do not do pujas and rituals as such, or yoga so much, and I'm not that such a great bhakt. But that doesn't mean that I can say that they're distracting, because I think that there have been great sages who have used those parts. And Bhagwan himself said. So I'm just very wary of negating anything in that sense or saying it's lesser. I think it's whatever is suitable. That is the honest, I think, truth for each of us. That what helps me now, if it's sitting in front of a statue, that is wonderful. If it's reciting a mantra, that's wonderful. If it helps to give me peace, to bring me back to what I truly am, that's all that matters, I think, If it's a walk in the park, that's really helpful at times. Okay, whatever. So I'm just a little bit, that maybe.
Bhagavan sings in verse 5 of Upadeshundiya. Ennuru yavam ireyuru amena enivari padalundi para isan nalpusane undi para. That means worshipping, considering all the 8 forms to be forms of God, is good worship of God. He gives a very broad definition of puja there. Because all the 8 forms, that means the 5 elements, the sun, the moon, and all jivas, all living beings. So,
This is the
so
beauty
long
of
as we
India.
consider it to be God and do the puja accordingly, then it's good worship of God.
Because
Charlie, I was the one who put that comment, but I think that the place where I'm coming from, rituals are actually coming from Purva Mimamsa, right? And Purva Mimamsikas are actually no God. They don't actually believe in God. They only believe in karma. So the rituals are actually, they're meant for very early stages when you're a kid or something. But, I feel like a lot of times what happens is people just take Vedanta and then they add in a lot of like rituals to it, and then it just becomes ritualistic. And I've done rituals all my life,
That's what I haven't.
brought up.
Okay,
No,
but
that's
can I
true.
say one
That's
thing?
true. But no, but that's what I'm saying. As a person who has done rituals, I can tell you that they are not. They don't focus your mind. They're extremely
They
distracting.
do
If you do any
actually.
karma,
Actually, I disagree with you there, because I've always looked down my
I
nose at
completely
ritual.
disagree.
I really have all my life. Quite frankly, I think I was born an Advaitin in some sense, and I grew up in this very rationalistic family. We didn't have all these rituals. There were pujas every day. There's none of this. But over time, as I go to Ramana Ashram and do other things, I appreciate that it can be. I mean, of course, it can focus the mind. If you can, I mean, if I go into a church, it can focus the mind. If you go to St. Paul's, there's a great silence. So I don't know. I think that it depends on how one does something. You can
I see a lot of like the kinds of things that you're saying is kind of what I subscribe to. And after, it was very dissatisfying for me because I was the only one that couldn't actually do any concentration. But now I can see why, because like by definition, these things take your mind outside. And the moment you're going outside, you're thinking about, oh, does the God has like, this flower, and why is this flower good? Like it's not done well. And maybe sometimes it's like, so it just automatically starts distracting your mind, and it's extremely. Anyway, I'm sure you have a different experience than I am, but I just feel like
it's
I'm
not
very
even
lucky
experience.
to.
The definition of puja, I'm just saying, simply from an academic point of view now, that the texts say that to really worship, for example, Shiva, you have to become Shiva. To worship a deity, you have to become that deity. That's also very interesting. So, at a deeper level, I'm just saying that, there are all kinds of things. But at a deeper level, if one looks at something in a deeper way, then, one does, it should lead to, it would lead to inner this thing. And I don't have, yeah.
It all depends upon our state of mind, because Ramakrishna Paramahamsa worshipped Kali, but with what tremendous love and complete surrender he worshipped. For him, Kali was his living mother, and it was all so real for him. But there are many people who do the same type of puja, but they do it very mechanically, and they may do it for this benefit or that benefit. It may be kamyata. So it's not the action that matters. The action is neither good nor bad. It's the attitude with which we do it. That's why Bhagavan begins Upadesha Undiyana by saying karma does not give liberation. But if it's done nishkamya and offered to God, if it's done for God, then it will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. So ultimately, it's not the action that matters. It's the attitude with which that is done.
Absolutely, Michael. Remember, even with Ramakrishna Paramhans, he was ticked off by sort of his Advaita Guru for hanging on.
Yeah, Totapuri.
Yes, for hanging, for being too fixated, because he wasn't able to see that simply as a as a form of the ultimate rather than. Venkat, did you want to ask? Have your hand up? Maybe it's just a mistake.
Yes, here. Actually, I have asked one of the question during one of the previous Zoom meetings that Michael have taken. I'm just seeking permission. Can I just use like 2 to 3 minutes of the clip of the question? Answer which was given by Michael to my question. Actually, it was on the finances. How Michael has managed the finances. Because see, for me, like youngster like me, I'm just so much obsessed. Like, how can I save 2 to 3 crores of money within 4 years or 5 years? So maybe I can focus more on the teachings of Bhagavan later. So I have asked this question to Michael. One of the previous session, he gave like beautiful answer. Okay, it's all by the grace of Bhagavan itself, everything has been taken care. So I just wanted to seek permission to take that clip and I can use on my YouTube channel. So it will be useful for other youngsters like me.
No permission is necessary. Bhagavan gave his teachings freely to all. So when we talk about his teachings, when we share his teachings, they should be shared freely with all. So yes, whatever you want to use in any way appropriate, you can use it in that way. It's not mine or yours. It's all. Everything is given by Bhagavan, and Bhagavan gives everything freely.
Michael, it really takes a lot of lives for us to really have that much of devotion towards Bhagavan like you. Okay, you have so much trust in Bhagavan that I don't know how many lifetimes it might take for people like me to even have even 1 inch of the devotion you have towards devotion.
don't be deceived by outward appearances. Inside, my mind is still going out towards Vishaya. So it is not any little devotion I have, it is given entirely by Bhagavan. And that applies to all of us equally. Why we're all here, why we're talking about him and his teachings, it's because he has given us that love for him. So there's nothing special about any of us. It's all, what is special is Bhagavan and his grace.
Michael, I think Bhagavan itself has sent you to us, in India actually, because we can't even, I mean, so much minute details are there. We can't even understand how to do self-enquiry. Only through your, I mean, whether you can say translation or like deciphering, we were able to understand like what Bhagavan actually said.
Well, that is all his grace. That is, Bhagavan can use any worthless instrument. He will use his old leaky pen to write Uludunapadu. So it's not the instrument he uses that we should appreciate. It's the user of the instrument.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
It was very nice, Michael, to have this informal chat, even
Yes.
was recorded, yes. And you must be quite tired. It's now over 3 hours.
Yes. I think it's.
I think it was quite long, but it was very, in a way, the informality also led to interesting, some interesting discussion.
Things happen as they're meant to happen.
Yeah, it was interesting.
We thought we had finished, and Bhagavan had other ideas. So.
But I think it's very important what you said, that whatever, I think this is Bhagwan's thing. I think it's also to a large extent, a more of a cultural thing also, that let people do what they want to do to a large extent,
Yes.
And if they find something good through it, there's benefit,
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of India, isn't it? The plurality that
it is.
You're not disciplined into believing prescribed this, that, and the other, or this is the truth, this is the way.
The beauty of Vedanta is it's got something for everyone.